There's this looming question in most of your brains, and it's in my brain too, even today. Should I actually continue to pursue making indie games, or is this a pipe dream? I actually got an email from one of my subscribers. Your name is Seth, and Seth's subject line in the email was, I don't know who I am or who I'm supposed to be. Seth, everybody feels this way. I even feel this way sometimes. Now, by the end of this video, we're gonna have Seth's question hopefully answered, and all of you are gonna have a better idea of, is making indie games something I should actually pursue? Is this crazy? And how do I approach it? Now, I wanna help you guys out as best as I can on your indie game journey. So there is a link below for a free 2D game kit. There's also a free 3D course below, and a free webinar about how to make six figures before you even finish your game. I've done this multiple times. Click those links below. They're totally free. No gimmicks here. They're my treat to you. All right, let's read Seth's email here. Basically, Seth says he used to call himself a storyteller. He says that this title acted as a rock for him, and he knew he could always conjure up a really great story. But recently, that rock has begun to shrink. What was once a boulder is now a pebble. He says his mind feels muddled and distant when it comes to searching for ideas, and it's beginning to frustrate him. For years now, he says, I've always wanted to create a game. Since then, he says he's slowly sinking into desire rather than action. We're going to talk about that feeling. He finishes off with a question. He says, am I really meant to be a game dev or something simpler like a writer? I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, what should I do? Firstly, let's address this feeling of what was once a rock in your mind, this identity of being a storyteller, and it now being a pebble. I want to address this. Well, firstly, of course, what was once a rock became a pebble. When you're younger, let's say, the house you grew up in seemed a lot bigger, but when you return to it, it's a lot smaller. The same is true with our ideas. When we're younger, we think our ideas are awesome. But in reality, they're actually pretty small and they're not the best ideas ever. And I've actually been struggling with this myself in my next game called Father. During the production of Father, I kind of feel sometimes that the story is very, very weak, that the gameplay is weak. And I compare it to my other games and I think those were my glory days, and I'm just so slowly burning out and losing my luster. But I presented Father to my friends and family, to publishers, and they love the game, and they love the story. The truth is, as we get older, we mature, okay? And that makes things look smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's not that our ideas, and it's not that our skill is shrinking. It's actually that we're able to see more clearly what our ideas' value actually is. But let's kind of talk about this whole pebble metaphor in a different way. You mentioned that your identity as a storyteller was your rock. And now it kind of feels like it's shattered, that it's not really there anymore. And it's really made you sad, it's made you disappointed. Well, this is also true of anything that's your identity. You guys have heard me say this before. If something is your identity, you're going to eventually be disappointed. Identities are temporary. Therefore, they really shouldn't even be a part of your day-to-day life. You shouldn't identify with one thing. You really shouldn't be identifying with anything. I believe you should identify with things that are eternal. I believe in God, so I think that should be your only identity. But all things on this planet turn to dust. So when you make them your identity, you're actually putting your anchor into something that is not going to last, and it will disappoint you. So instead of you being a storyteller, instead of you being a game developer, instead of you being an artist or a digital entrepreneur or a YouTuber or a gamer, those identities, those should be passions. They should not be identities. They should be, dare I say, hobbies. I actually consider this, me making YouTube videos, me making video games, I actually consider this a hobby despite the fact that it makes me hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. It's still a hobby in my brain because, quite frankly, just because it makes money doesn't make it any more valuable eternally. It's just a hobby. It's just a silly game. So you need to minimize that rock to the size of a pebble, which it sounds like you've done. I think you just need to embrace the fact that it is actually just a pebble. This identity in storytelling, making games, and being an artist, it doesn't need to be an identity anymore. You need to let it go. Now, don't get me wrong, I totally know this feeling. That's why I'm speaking to it. I totally understand how it feels to obsess over something and turn it into, I guess I would call it an idol that's manifest, and you've put it on your shelf and you worship it. You need to toss that idol out. You need to just have fun again. You need to fall in love again with telling stories. Now that brings me to my next point here. Ultimately, you're not going to move towards something that you don't love. Worship is a lot different than love. Worship can be a perverse form of love. And worship can inspire fear, and it can inspire regret, and it can also force you to sort of stay put and not move towards something. But when you actually see something for what it is, it's easier to love it appropriately. So my question to you, Seth, is do you actually love making games? You don't know whether you want to be a storyteller or a game developer. Many of you watching this video, you don't know whether you want to be a graphic designer or a game developer, or maybe a musician, or maybe you want to get into sales or engineering. If you don't know, you really need to figure out what you actually love. Now, we're going to talk about profitability and the whole business side, the practical side. But knowing what you love is really, really important before you even think about making money from something. Do you actually love making games? So here's how we find out. We find out what you love by taking a break. It's kind of like a really toxic relationship, and you just need a break. The same is true with your passions, or in your case, potentially your idols. You need to take a break from them. You need to take a sabbatical. You need to have Lent away from your game, away from your stories, away from your digital products. Whatever your passion is, distance yourself from it. And I had to do this recently. I distanced myself from my game Father because I was so obsessed that I started to hate it with a passion. I was worshiping Father, this game I was working on, and I was at a point where I just wanted it to explode. I wanted it to die. I wanted to bury it. You need to take a break. So I would recommend 2 weeks off minimum. Don't think about your stories or your games or your passions. Take a break, take a breather. Come back to that project or that story that you're working on, and then reconsider if you actually love it, okay? Which one do you love more? Telling stories, writing novels, or your video game? Or for those of you watching, which one do you love more? Getting a law degree or making indie games? Getting an engineering degree or that engineering job you have? Or making games? It's really hard to know what to pursue when you don't know what you love. So once you've figured out what you love, we now have that answer, okay? We're going to push that aside. Now we need to figure out what you're good at, okay? There's a difference. And specifically when it comes to what you're good at, what will make you money? So it's a totally different question and a totally different function, okay? This one's all about business and entrepreneurship. So this question, the way you find the answer is kind of what you did with itch.io. You make a vertical slice, you make a demo, and then you release it to the public. You release it on itch.io, on social media, to your friends and family. But I would highly recommend you do the same with your stories. Release both, a demo or a sample manuscript for your stories or your novels, because you're considering being a novelist, and then release a small little demo, and maybe even pitch it to publishers and see if publishers are willing to fund it. Now, here's the ideal situation. What you found out you loved the most, if that is connected to which product is also loved the most by your community, if those are linked and tied together, if they're the same thing, you're in for a treat. It means that what you love is also profitable, and that is a recipe for success. And we really need to figure out if that's true. Now, it's okay if it's not true. It might be that what you love isn't actually profitable. But if you find that they're the same, you should pursue that. Now, I'll leave you with this, Seth. I think you might be thinking a little bit too binary and, dare I say, dramatic about which path to choose. They're not paths. They're not doors, okay? You can go through both doors because, well, they're not doors. It's kind of like diving into a river and figuring out, do you like swimming in that side of the river or this side of the river, or maybe you want to swim in the middle, okay? You don't have to pick either right now. The same is true for you guys watching. You don't have to pick, do I want to be a YouTuber or do I want to make games? Do I want to be a gamer or do I want to be like streaming product reviews? Or do I want to be a lawyer or an engineer? You don't have to figure out exactly which one you want to do. I really don't like this mentality. And I see people fall prey to this all the time. And a lot of people say, well, the older you get, you need to figure out what you're going to do and you need to lock in on one thing. Sometimes I think that's true, but I'm 31 years old now. I pay the bills. My family's building wealth. I have kids. And yet I'm spinning like 5-6 plates at a time. I'm running an online school. I'm doing YouTube videos. I'm making indie games. I'm working with publishers. I'm writing a book. I'm making movies. I'm doing all this stuff, and I don't know which one's the best path. And I don't really think of it that way because ultimately, back to our original point, it's not an identity for me. They're hobbies. They just happen to make me money. And I think you should think about it the same way, Seth. Minimize the value, minimize the importance of making games or being a storyteller. Ultimately, minimize your career. Don't overvalue it. And the moment you do that, you can actually fall in love again and see it for what it is and see more clearly the path you should take. Don't forget, guys, to download that free 2D game kit below. Also, check out my webinar below on how to make 6 figures before you finish your game, and also my free 3D course below. Totally free, no gimmicks, my treat to you guys. They're going to help you out a lot. Links in the description. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more indie game dev content, and leave a comment about which path you guys want to take. Do you want to be an indie game developer? Let me know. I'll talk to you guys later. Cheers.